Good evening, everyone. I'm Linda Ayers. Welcome to Tuesday Talks DC, brought to you by the Cleveland and Woodley Park Village, Cleveland Park Main Street, Woodley Park Main Street, and the DC Public Library. I invite you to join in the conversation tonight at any time by posting your comments and questions using the chat function on your screen. At the end of tonight's presentation, Pat Whitty from the Village will moderate a Q&A session. And tonight's talk is Never a Dull Moment, Behind the Curtain of the Cleveland Park Listserv, and features Peggy Robin, co-founder of the Listserv, which is the largest moderated neighborhood listserv in the entire United States. It's in its 23rd year and numbers some 12,400 members. And to my mind, it's one of the things that links together our extended community of Cleveland Park and Woodley Park and beyond. Peggy is the author, co-author, or compiler of more than a dozen nonfiction books, including Saving the Neighborhood, You Can Fight Developers and Win, The Safe Nanny Handbook, How to Be a Successful Fertility Patient, and Kids' Letters to President Obama. Peggy has appeared on The Today Show, The Maury Povich Show, The Diane Rehm Show, and as a contestant on Jeopardy. She graduated from UC Berkeley and has lived in Cleveland Park since 1976. She's in conversation tonight with John Barlow Weiner, president of the Cleveland Park Citizens Association. Barr grew up in New York City, received his BA from Princeton and his JD from Columbia University School of Law. He is Assistant Director for Policy in the Food and Drug Administration's Office of Combination Products. And Barr has lived in Cleveland Park for the past 9 years. And now I'd like to welcome Peggy Robin and Barr Weiner.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Hi, Peggy.
Hi, Barr. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good.
So, folks, we were just thinking we would make this kind of a chatty conversation. I was so excited when Linda suggested I interview Peggy for everybody on Tuesday Talks. I've gotten to know Peggy a little bit, really mostly by email in the last few years. Just getting
That's how I know
issues.
everybody in the neighborhood.
Exactly. That's not unique. And it's such a wonderful thing you've done for the neighborhood. It's just that you can see why so many people have already logged in to hear you talk. So why don't we just get rolling? So maybe just to start off, could you talk a little bit about, how you moved to Cleveland Park and, why you decided to do the Listserv?
I'll start with the Listserv because you don't want to hear why I moved to Cleveland Park. But
okay.
About 23 years ago, there was a listserv called the Adams Morgan Listserv on One List. And my husband, Bill Adler, decided to check it out, even though we don't live in Adams Morgan. And he thought, well, this would be a good thing for Cleveland Park. So he started the Cleveland Park Listserv. And he said to me, look what I've started. And would you join? I joined. He made me co-moderator. I said, what is that? I have no idea what it was. I wasn't a member of the Adams Morgan Listserv. And but he immediately ran out to the Cleveland Park Club and put up flyers asking people to join. And he put flyers in a couple of the neighborhood stores. And within a month, we had 300 members. And within 2 or 3 months, we were bigger than Adams Morgan. It really took off. And I quickly learned what it was. I didn't even know how to do email at the time. I just barely had an email address. But it's very intuitive. If you can send an email, you can post to the Listserv. And in the beginning, it was just a little hobby. It was just something that took a few minutes a day. Throughout the day, we could do lots of other things. We were working on lots of other books. We were both book authors. And the first big change that came with the Elian Gonzalez case. I don't know if you remember the story of this little boy. He was in a shipwreck. He was a refugee from Cuba, and his mother died tragically. He was sent to live with his great uncle and and his cousin in Miami. And his father, who was in Cuba and didn't even know his son was leaving Cuba, wanted to get his son back. And while this custody case was going on, it was extremely contentious. The father and Elian were moved into a house in Cleveland Park on the Rosedale estate. And once the people back in Miami knew that he was in Cleveland Park, they looked up and they looked it up and found the Cleveland Park listserv and thought, oh, we can send messages to those people in Cleveland Park. And one day I woke up and I turned on the listserv, and which was not moderated at all. And there were like 10 messages, all in all caps, saying, bring Elian Gonzalez home. Why are you kidnapping? Let him go. And then we realized, uh-oh, we've got a problem on our hands. So I deleted all the messages. My husband and I deleted all the messages that were being posted. And then we realized we've got to moderate this list. So we moderated the list, which means that nobody can post anything unless we review it and approve it. And that helped in a lot of other ways too, because we had some other problems that had cropped up in the first few months. And the big problem is shilling. People pretending to be customers of, let's say, a painter or a plumber. And it's really the painter or the plumber making up an email address and saying that, oh, I use this plumber, he's the greatest guy. And he's got a special this week, something that a normal customer wouldn't know. But yes, once we could moderate, we could also start dealing with the shilling problem that we realized we had right away.
How could you tell that was going on? How do you tell us a fake email address?
For one thing, we joined all the other lists that were popping up. At the time we started our list, there were maybe 10 other lists being started. And you'd see the same person using a different name, saying exactly the same thing. Like, my name is Bob, and I live in Georgetown, and I use this plumber. He's the greatest guy. And then, my name is Bob. I live in Mount Pleasant, and I use this plumber. He's the greatest. They're not very good at it. Now, once we started moderating and writing to people and saying, you can't do this, then they got cleverer at it. And then we really had to start using some other methods to track down people for shilling. And we also had to start writing some rules. And we've added rules every time there's been a problem on the list. And that's why there are 10 printed pages of rules if you printed out all the Cleveland Park rules. And I still tinker with them. I still add them. I should say also that this was a joint venture with my husband, Bill, and me. And we used to have 4 or 5 other volunteer moderators. And about 4 years ago, the listserv was still growing strong, but the marriage wasn't doing too well. And so Bill and I are separated, and he's still my technical advisor, but I'm basically the only one moderating the list.
Oh my, I was going to ask you about it. It must take a tremendous amount of time.
Oh, it does. It does. And I used to write books on the side. I had all these nonfiction books that I was working on. And this has really morphed into a full-time job, really more than a full-time job, because I don't take weekends off.
Oh my God. Yeah, I can attest to that. You're at any hour to help.
The other major change, this is probably the most major change that we ever made, more so than moderating everybody. The most major change was when we decided, well, this is a full-time job and we've got to make money at it because we're not paying enough attention to writing books or doing other things. So we started charging for advertising. And right now, membership is free. Neighbors can post about neighborhood things for free. They can sell their personal things. But if they want to sell houses, if they want to post business services, if they want to basically do any business over the list, other than asking for recommendations, it's a paid service.
Did that affect the dynamic at all for you? Are you sort of like a kind of an owner as well as a moderator, so to speak?
Yes, and it very much does. And I get people all the time who want to post something and I turn it down. Generally, I turn it down because I think it's not a good subject for the listserv, or they're attacking somebody, or there's something not nice about it. And they say, well, this is censorship. And I say, no, it isn't. This is my private publication. And I decide what gets on and what doesn't get on. And it's not a public space. I own it.
That's a very interesting issue because obviously listserv serves a lot of purposes, which is one of the things that's so remarkable about it. from sort of the really mundane to the really pretty significant for the community and even for the larger city on issues. How do you manage that? Because you are providing essentially a public forum, although you're trying to moderate it, and there's pretty significant debates that come up on your listserv.
Right, but I don't consider it a public forum. And anybody says it is a public forum, I say, no, it's a private publication. You're wrong.
But nonetheless, you have a lot of people debating on your forum. Yeah.
I do. And I do try to let all sides speak equally. I try not to favor one side or another, although everybody's got to stay civil. And if there are any personal attacks, I cut that off right away.
That's really important. I feel like it's such a challenging thing because this is not a neighborhood that lacks for opinions on things, and it can get kind of hot and heavy sometimes. I think the listserv is such a valuable way to at least get a sense of what's going on, and people can hopefully hear from each other a bit if they can remain polite and respectful.
And that's the thing that's been most surprising to me, because when I moved to this neighborhood in '76, I thought, oh gosh, this is the nicest neighborhood, the friendliest people. They're all so sweet. My neighbors have always been wonderful people. And then they get online and they start hitting each other with brickbats.
So what's your sort of sense of like the kind of the most, what's most meaningful for you about the listserv? What do you think are the most important things it does from your perspective?
Well, of course, the main thing it does is give people recommendations, and I do my best to make sure that the recommendations come from other neighbors who have actually used the service. They're not recommending their brother-in-law, and that they don't get any financial kickbacks or benefits from it. And that does take a lot of policing, because people do try to get around these rules. It's kind of darkened my view of human nature, to tell you the truth, although everybody says, the internet has brought out the worst in people. And,
well, one thing I enjoy about the listserv is there's definitely some fun in it, and some great April Fools among other things. Are there any particular stories on that line you might want to share about what you try to put out there to make fun?
Bill started the tradition of the April Fool's joke, and I've kept it up every year since. The very best April Fool was the animal that escaped from the zoo, the Loof Lurpa. And not only did we have a lookout for this animal and asked people to click on this link if they cited the animal, which is, of course, would have revealed the fact that it was an April Fool's joke. But so many people don't click on links. But what the great thing about that particular April Fool is that the police played along, and they said they were out looking for it, and they wanted.
That's amazing.
It was so fun.
I really like the one about it was Walmart, I think, right? Putting the Target. Oh no, Target.
Target was going to buy the naming rights to the Cleveland Park Metro.
That was so perfectly timed.
Some of them are not that implausible.
Yeah.
After we did the one about the water bar coming to charge, $9 for a glass of water, coming to Cleveland Park, people started sending me real water bars in other places. This wasn't that far-fetched. And then of course we get the outrage reactions too. One year we said that there was going to be a new store opening up. It was a pet hotel and pet brothel. And people said, how can they get that? That's not allowed by zoning.
Oh, that's great. What is the kind of the top use of the listserv as far as you can see? Mostly promotion of sales, or which way what are like the top things that happen on the listserv?
The number one thing is recommendations, queries. Can somebody recommend an orthopedist, or again, plumbers, electricians, painters, nannies. That's a big thing, is nannies. And that's how I know that we have all ages, because we have so many young people with young families looking for nannies. We have old people looking for caregivers. I once did a demographic survey, and I found that it was very spread out. We had apartment dwellers, we had single family homeowners, every type that is in this neighborhood we have.
I saw a good question that's pop up here because it speaks to me. With the pandemic, it was really challenging for neighborhood organizations to really engage with the community. We got very familiar with Zoom, but we couldn't have meetings anymore. And, it was a tough time to kind of feel like you're really engaging in an authentic way. And the listserv was very helpful in that regard. The question has popped up about to what extent you really thought the listserv changed at all during or because of the pandemic or during it. Is that something that you've noticed?
Yes, it's changed a great deal. And for one thing, I think we really did kind of, especially when it came to finding vaccines, that was taking up a lot of time and it was all very worthwhile. And I think we helped a lot of people find vaccines, find services. If they couldn't go out, they found ways to connect with people. I think that I feel very proud of what we did with that. Yeah, it was and that we're still doing it. But the biggest change was that so many restaurants and places went out of business. We lost a lot of our sponsors and we really took an economic hit. And a lot of people said to me, I want to keep advertising, but I just don't have the money. Can I keep advertising for free? And I think most of the time I said yes, because, I know what they're going through. I don't want them to fail.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's been very difficult. And it's getting better, but not back yet.
Right. Yeah. No, we're still very down in terms of the ad revenue that we used to have.
So one thing that's always kind of made me curious was we talked about the issue about debates and keeping it polite and respectful, but why it even happens was something I think was a surprise to us when we moved to the neighborhood. There's so many people willing. It's one thing for me to put a post up as someone from a neighborhood organization, but there's so many people in the neighborhood who are just happy to share their views with their 12,000 best friends. Is that something that's developed over time, or do you have a feeling for why it's such an active forum, I guess?
It's so easy to do. I mean, if you can send an email, you can send your opinion to the listserv. But I spend a great part of my day saying to people, look, somebody already made this point, or you've posted 3 times already, time to let somebody else talk.
Right.
I try to be gentle about it, but some people they won't shut up. Let me put it that way.
Have you ever encouraged any kind of engagement? Like you feel like something needs to be heard or something in the debate or on a given topic? Or
in the very early years of the listserv, we would both Bill and I would sometimes start a debate. We felt things were too quiet. Let's this is an interesting issue and nobody's posted about it yet. We haven't had to do that in a long time.
But turning to sort of back to you a bit, Linda was mentioning at the beginning that you were on Jeopardy. What was that about? Is that tied to listserv stories at all? Does it show your fascination with issues? Or
not really, because I've always been interested in trivia and word puzzles and games, and but I did find through the listserv that I could advertise my Jeopardy watch party, and I must have had 70 people turn out for that. That was a lot of fun. And also when I did my little chat with Alex Trebek, I was in his last year of hosting Jeopardy, I was one of the contestants. He asked me where I was from, what I did, and I told him I ran the Cleveland Park Listserv. And I said what kind of things that people are very concerned about, such as disposing of dog poop. One of our hot issues. It's a perennial issue. The following issues come up again and again and again: the service lane, dog poop, magazine door-to-door solicitors is a hot issue, although we haven't had that in a few years. I guess because people don't go door-to-door during the pandemic. Yeah, that's pretty much stopped.
I think the poop went up and the solicitations went down, is my impression.
Right. Oh, bad mail delivery. We've had that every single year, and it does get worse every year. So,
do you have any tips for folks about how to kind of best use the listserv? Your experience with it? You say you work with people to try to get them to post effectively, but whether it's debates or just simply helping they get people to use it better for other purposes.
What I really want people to understand is that this is not the place to have a one-on-one debate with somebody. So don't ask somebody a question and demand that they answer it. Talk to the whole community. Talk in a way that anybody can respond to you, not just the person you're mad at. And that keeps things civil. It keeps things open to everybody, and makes my life easier.
That makes a lot of sense. On that theme, we mentioned this earlier, but it really does strike me that this is all on you these days, and it really seems like it's just tremendous flow. Are you thinking of bringing anybody else in, and how do we ensure this sort of continues along? You become a vital kind of conduit for community engagement. So it's a pretty serious thing to make sure it keeps working.
Yes, and in the early years of the listserv, we used to have about 5 or 6 other volunteer moderators. But once we started charging for ads, we didn't have enough income coming in to pay the other moderators. So, and it didn't seem fair to ask them to do something for free that we were getting money out of. So I now have backup moderators who will handle it in a pinch if I'm gone.
Okay.
So I can take a vacation. And I want to give a shout out to Mary Rouse, who runs the Chevy Chase listserv. And she's my most frequent backup moderator. And she also runs a very big contentious, big listserv with a lot of people that are quite contentious. Now she's got about 5,000 people on hers and we've got 12,000. So it's not quite
Amazing.
the same.
Yeah,
And they don't take advertising, but
so are you committed to the cause for the distant future? Or what's your vision for the listserv now that you've got this thing running? It's such an important
well, I mean,
phenomenon.
My focus right now is keeping people on the listserv and not having them defect to that Silicon Valley controlled behemoth next door, which I hate, which is controlled by algorithms. They have to take stuff down all the time because they have so much offensive stuff that gets put up, and they don't pre-moderate. They only moderate after someone complains.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So
I haven't heard that much about them. I've gotten notification, of course. I guess a lot of people have. I have not signed up for that. Is that really an issue that you're finding that there's
it does take away from what we do, and I think it does it much more poorly. And yeah, that's my big bugaboo right now, and they're not going anywhere. I mean, they're like Reddit or Twitter. They may be dominated by trolls, but it's the biggest thing around, and it's hard to compete.
Yeah, it's frustrating. Well, you certainly seem to be competing pretty well so far. I just find it amazing how many things you can find on this listserv. It's an amazing resource. I've never experienced something like that before we moved to Cleveland Park. Do you find? I mean, I know you said there are people who, you know, they look for contractors. They offer items for sale or for giveaway. Is there been any trends in that in terms of whether there's a lot more of folks who are just looking for contractors or trying to give more stuff away or trying to sell instead? Is it there's sort of a shifting around of kind of how much of what there is on the listserv?
No, I think it's pretty consistent from year to year. And I always do an end of the year roundup in which I talk about what were the big issues on the list for the year behind us. And yeah, I sometimes do like statistical counts of what percentage of posts were giveaways, what percentage were recommendations or queries. And I find that it's all pretty well distributed. We do a lot of everything.
That's great. Oh, and by the way, going back to the issue of sort of debates and things, I was struck by the fact that you kind of weighed in on the redistricting issue a few weeks ago. When do you decide you want to kind of get in the mix or not get in the mix? How do you sort of just?
That was the first. Hey, that was the first time I did it. I try not to do that.
Yeah, I know.
But as I said in that editorial, my first ever editorial, I was an ANC commissioner for 8 years, and the ANC was very important to me. And really, that was when I kind of dived into neighborhood life. And there were some similarities also between running a listserv and being a neighborhood commissioner. The day after I was elected, somebody called me up and said, "What are you going to do about my neighbor's bushes?" Like, I'm supposed to call their neighbor and tell them to cut their bushes because I'm an ANC commissioner. And that's kind of what I do as a moderator too. I tell people, no, you cannot complain about your neighbor's bushes by name on the listserv. Call your neighbor and talk to your neighbor yourself.
That's a terrific point. This whole thing about, arguments I feel like they're becoming more vicious and binary and less about kind of trying to find a solution, more about just sort of, airing grievances.
Well, I hope you don't feel that's happening on the listserv, because I try to shut that out.
Yeah, no, I feel like the listserv is one of our meaningful hopes for trying to get people to hear each other, just because it is moderated and you have to read, which slows you down, and you have to type, which slows you down, and all those sorts of things. But what's your sense about discourse? Because you've been watching this for a while. Is that becoming more of a challenge? Do you have any advice on that?
I think people, Yeah, I think it has gotten worse. People are used to Twitter, they're used to Reddit, they're used to forums where they can call people names, and they're shocked to find that I won't allow it, and they'll complain that I'm censoring them. And then I say, it's my listserv, goodbye.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't think we're going to really have much hope of really hearing each other if it's a bunch of attacks. So I think that's really important personally, and I think CPCA really thinks it's important as well. So I appreciate that.
And if somebody's bad enough, I will ban them. I haven't banned very many people. I've mostly banned people who try to spam the list. And that's not neighbors. That's usually just people from overseas or somewhere else in the country.
So what's your vision going forward? You're going to try to have an even bigger list? You think it's just maxed out? What's your sense of things for the next steps?
Well, when we were at Yahoo Groups, and we were at Yahoo Groups until 2019, and they provided a free platform. Now we're at groups.io and it's paid. But when we were at Yahoo Groups, they didn't do a good job of making sure that all the dead email addresses were removed. So it seemed like we were growing and growing and growing, because if an email address went away, it stayed on the list forever. We seemed to have 18,000 people at one point. And when we moved to groups.io, they have a very different kind of platform, and they remove dead email addresses very quickly. So we now have 12,400 and something verified members, but it's been at that number for quite a while. And even though we do get about 20 people a week join, we also get about the same number leaving. So there are new members coming in every week. We are getting new people in that sense, but sometimes they switch email addresses, sometimes they move away. So the number has been stable at about 12,400 for quite a while. Whereas under Yahoo Groups, it kept going up and up and up, but it seemed that there was no limit.
That's interesting. It sort of stabilizes. I guess it shows it's largely a community organization.
Right, and it still spreads mainly by word of mouth. The days are long gone when Bill used to run around putting out flyers saying, join the Cleveland Park Listserv.
Well, it's really known to us. When I first came to the neighborhood, that was one of the first things we knew about actually coming in with, which is this amazing list service, this huge thing. You got to get on there. That's where everything's going on. And I never experienced that before.
And there are listservs like it on groups.io across the country, but as I said, we're really the only one that's this large and all moderated. And also I subscribe to all these other city lists. So, I get the police reports and I get the fire and emergency service reports, and I don't always get them on in a timely way, but I usually get them on within 5 or 6 hours. So,
that's terrific.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very impressed. Is there anything else you want to say before we hand you over to Pat? Because there's a lot of questions coming in.
Well, I did want to tell one story about why not only is everybody on the listserv moderated, but why the moderators are moderated.
Oh, right.
And that is when Mary Che first ran for council in 2006. There were about 8 or 10 other people in the race too, and one of them was this man named Jonathan Reese, and he was really just a real troll, and he used to make up different email addresses, join the listserv, and try to post saying bad things about Mary Che, saying bad things about all the other candidates in the list. Sometimes he posted as if he were them. And, we had it all moderated at that point, so we could keep him from doing that. Sometimes he created 100 different Yahoo addresses, and he kept popping up. He kept trying to post. We kept suppressing all his posts, and then he actually stalked us in person. He also stalked Martin Ostermule, who was then a city paper reporter. He's now an NPR reporter, but he stalked and threatened Martin Ostermule. He stalked and threatened a federal judge who had handled his divorce case. And in fact, the FBI knew who he was. When he actually physically showed up at our office, we used to have an outside office at that point. When he actually physically showed up and scared our office administrator, we did call the FBI. which was the most disappointing conversation I've ever had, because they said, well, you really can't prove it's him. I said, first of all, it's the same IP address almost all the time. Sometimes he used different computers, but most of the time it was the same IP address. And he also had the same bizarre spelling mistakes. That's the main thing that tipped us off to the fact that somebody posting under a different name was actually him, because he couldn't spell.
Sounds like something out of a mystery show.
It was, and it went on for about 3 years.
Oh my gosh.
And it finally ended when he got cancer. He joined a cancer support group where he harassed so many people there that they banned him from the cancer support group.
Wow.
When we actually heard that he had died, we didn't believe it. We thought it was another one of his hoaxes, and that it was just a fake. But somebody did confirm to us that he had in fact died. But,
Wow.
he really
That's a
terrified.
sad and bizarre story.
It was a sad and bizarre story. It had so many different twists to it. I haven't really even gone into half of what happened. But we had to moderate ourselves, because at one point he faked Bill's email address, and so Bill wasn't moderated, and he posted all kinds of other things. He also went on Craigslist and posted that Bill was a pedophile. That was another low point, very low point. Bill called up Craig Newmark, who at that point had not sold his Craigslist for billions, and was answering the phone in person. And Bill said, there's this guy posting on your list and defaming me. And Craig Newmark said, yes, I know all about him. He's been doing that to a lot of people. And I do my best to remove it as soon as I see it, but it's hard.
Well, I want to thank you for all your work for the neighborhood. I can't imagine what things be like without the Listserv. It's just such a core thing. We refer everybody to it for so many reasons, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful resource. So thank you for that.
It's my baby, and as my adult children used to tell me when they were little children, you give that all your attention. Why don't you pay any attention to us? It's my third child.
Well, let me hand you over to Pat now. I know we have a bunch of questions coming in. I want to run out of time. So Pat, are you ready to go?
I'm ready. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Bar. Thank you, Peggy. This is sort of like the insider's insider thing. I mean, it's like, how much more inside can you get? It's very interesting. One question that has come up in the chat, but also that I've always had, is just exactly how much of every day do you spend on this?
Oh, I would say I definitely work an 8-hour day, although I do it in glumps throughout the day. So you may notice that there are a flurry of messages in the morning, and then like between 9:30 and 11, there might be no messages. And then around lunchtime, there's another flurry of messages. And, I take a big dinner break and I come back to it at night, and I try to put through as many as I can at night. Sometimes the list is more active at night than I would like, and I will just defer things till the next morning. I do try to space things out. And one of the ways that I try to keep the temperature down on arguments on the listserv is by spacing out the reply. So you don't get people writing boom, 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 going at each other. I may even wait a full day between a reply on a heated thread, starting it up again.
What's the volume like, though? You say you get a few in the morning, you get fewer. Maybe the question ought to be, what has generated the biggest volume, and what?
Around election time, you can see that the posting numbers go way, way up anytime there's an election, because you get a lot of people arguing about the candidates. And that's the case now. Right before the primary, people were starting to get a lot of posts about candidates. And anytime there's been a sudden issue, like DDOT proposes some sort of major traffic shift, yes, you're going to hear a lot of people on that. And I try to, but I also try to keep the number of messages that people have to read down to a manageable number. You know, we could have 150 messages a day pretty easily if I just sort of approved everything. And I don't want to overwhelm people. The reason that I think the listserv is readable is because it doesn't get to be too much. You don't hear that the same people going back and forth again and again and again. I mean, it may seem like the listserv is repetitive, but I'm taking out a lot of repetitive stuff.
That's interesting. As a percentage, do you have a feel for what you're eliminating?
Yes, I can tell you exactly what it is because I sometimes calculate the percentages. On a day when I'm really trying to hold the volume down, I may delete 50% of the stuff. Now, most of the stuff that gets deleted is because it's unsigned or because it asks a question that could easily be Googled. I mean, I once had somebody post, is the Cleveland Park Metro open? Well, you know, go to the Metro site and find out. You can't ask the listserv every question. Somebody once wanted the phone number for one of the shops down the block. You know, it's a lot easier ways to find a phone number.
Now, bothering you. Do you ever, let me ask this a different way. You mentioned that you take advertising dollars at this point and I assume sponsorships, but is that the sum total of how you finance this for yourself? Have you considered doing donations? Members?
I have considered it. DC Urban Moms and Dads, which at one point was the biggest listserv when they operated as a listserv, they're now just a website. They also wanted to see if they could exist on advertising dollars and donations, and they asked for donations. They got maybe $500. And people love that listserv. I mean, it's still very popular among families of young children, but they've given up the listserv part of it entirely, and they're just a blog now, a blog and a forum.
So member fees are not on the table. You sign up, you pay $25 to be a member.
I have what's called a premium membership, which if you pay $50 a year, yes, you get all kinds of privileges. You have almost no restrictions on what you can use the listserv for selling. Otherwise, the for sale messages are very limited. But it's not very popular, and people are so used to being able to post for free, and they're really outraged at the thought that it's not free. So on the other hand, the idea that it's going to cost you to advertise is something people accept. So yeah, that works.
You mentioned earlier that you have now, you said, I think 10 pages of rules. What are the ones that are most controversial?
Don't question someone's motive for making a post. That's the thing where people really argue. They say, I'm not questioning their motives, but they said this or they said that. Or sometimes they didn't say something, but they implied something. It's what people read into other people's posts that starts the controversies, that they assume the worst of why somebody's saying something. And I'm saying, you can't do that. You're going to have to go with what they actually said. If you want to quote what they said and argue with it, you can do that. But you can't assume that because they think this, then they also think that.
So I'm thinking you also have a degree in psychiatry here. Or
I should have a degree in psychology. You know what I learned the most from is when my daughter was in her debate club in high school, and she brought home this whole list of rules about what constitutes a fair debate. And I thought, I should apply this to the listserv because this is all very sensible. You can't call anybody names. You have to back up what you say. You just can't assume that you heard it somewhere, therefore it's true. And I do write to people and say, what's your source for this? If you're going to say this and people are going to argue with you about it, you're going to have to be able to back it up. And of course, that's why it takes so long to run the list, because I don't just put things through.
There are a number of questions here in the chat, and I know I'm kind of skipping around because there are so many of them. But one of the questions that is interesting to me is Judy says, ask about your daughters. And so I thought I'd ask you about your daughters and see what happens.
Oh, well, I'm not related to the list, but I have the two most wonderful daughters in the world. My younger daughter just got engaged. She lives in Philadelphia and she's a transportation planner. My older daughter lives in New York and she's a book editor for Routledge Publishing. They're like a major academic book publisher. In fact, they come down here a lot.
And they're no doubt members of the listserv.
Oh, no, I can't get them to join the listserv. I think I made them join just so that they can serve as backup moderators if I need them. But it's, as I said, they're tired of hearing about my third child.
Well, that's probably understood. But that brings up an interesting question because you said one of your daughters lives in New York. Do you have or are you able to enforce geographic limits on?
I don't want to. I really feel that anybody who's interested in the neighborhood or has some sort of connection to the neighborhood, even if they've moved away or even if they just have a relative who lives here, there's no reason why they can't be a member. I don't let them use the listserv to sell stuff for free. They have to pay a selling fee if they want to use the listserv that way. But sometimes people have said to me, well, why is this person commenting on traffic in Cleveland Park when they live in Bethesda? And I say, well, if they come to Cleveland Park and they're interested in Cleveland Park, why shouldn't they? If they disclose where they live, yes, they should do that. And I don't require people to say where they live, but it's encouraged. They only have to say where they live if they're using the listserv to sell things. Then they have to be a neighbor.
You mentioned early on that you used to write books, nonfiction books, I think you said.
Right. I've written 12 books and probably worked on another few dozen.
But are you writing anymore?
No, not.
Have you considered writing a book about the listserv?
I have. I've considered writing a novel about the listserv. I think I think that would be a lot of intertwined stories that could be very funny, but I haven't gotten down to it. Well,
maybe next year.
Maybe next year. Maybe next year.
Well, that's great. Do you know? Is it common? This is the biggest listserv, biggest neighborhood listserv.
Right.
I understand that's a distinction in the country, but it's privately owned. Are they all privately owned? Is that common? Is that uncommon? Do you know?
That's the setup. Now, when they were on Yahoo groups, you didn't have to pay. You were still called the list owner, but you didn't have to pay for it, but you had to accept Yahoo ads, which would be interspersed through every few messages. Yahoo has this algorithm in which they would figure out what people in your group were interested in, and they'd try to advertise. Now with our group, they saw the word Cleveland and they figured we were interested in businesses in Cleveland. So for a long time, Yahoo was sprinkling Cleveland, Ohio ads throughout the listserv. That may be one of the reasons why Yahoo failed. But they failed in 2019. We went over to groups.io, which is a paid service. You can run a group of less than 100 people for free on groups.io. But we pay for the service. We got in on the ground floor of groups.io when running the listserv is fairly cheap. If you were to join now and you wanted to run a group of over 100 members, they would charge you per member, and a group of 12,000 members would become extremely unaffordable.
Wow. Well, that's very interesting. Do you, you started this, I gather, sort of as a hobby. Was there a role model, or did you basically sort of create the concept yourself?
Well, our original role model was the first one that we saw in DC, which was Adams Morgan. But within a few months, we were bigger than Adams Morgan, and Adams Morgan remained unmoderated. And we, after discovering that people from Cuba, from Miami rather, could bombard listserv with their political point of view, we realized we had to become all moderated. And so, and we've been that way ever since. But yeah, we had to kind of invent it as we went along.
Well, it worked out well. What's the most exciting thing that you've done? Or maybe I should say, what's the exchange, or what's the event, or what's the part of this that gives you the most excitement or most pleasure?
Well, I think the ongoing thing that gives me most pleasure is when people post a lost dog, and that mobilizes people to look for the dog, and then they find the dog. And every time that happens, I feel like, oh, we're doing a lot of good. But of course, during the pandemic, I had that feeling a lot, that people were trying to find shot and vaccines, and there was a shortage, and they found ways to and they passed each other tips about how you could get an appointment for a vaccine. I think that helped a lot of people. It was time consuming, but very worthwhile.
You spend a lot of time trying to understand, for example, you're giving out information about the location of vaccine. Do you get a lot of questions about, should I take a vaccine? Should I not?
I decided really early in the pandemic that we were not going to debate medical issues, that this wasn't the place for that. And I spent a lot of time explaining that to people. You don't post your reasons why you're not getting it or why you're getting it. Go to Reddit. If you want to do that, there's a big forum called Reddit where people can debate things endlessly in circles. But everything here has got to relate in some way to life in this neighborhood.
You mentioned that one of the major, or perhaps the biggest, number one thing on your listserv is recommendations, and you said that you think nannies may be the chief among those. What are some of the other ones that seem to be significant to you in terms of requests for recommendations?
Well, the medical recommendations are very important, and people have found. I mean, I think of the best thing that I can think of recently was we had a list member who was in the hospital needing blood platelets, and she posted, I'm really in need here, and a lot of people stepped up and donated, and I think that helped her personally. But people have not known what kind of specialists they need to see. And the thing is that people can reply privately, and they do for medical issues. So, they can discuss their own cases without having to make it public. And I think that also is a good way that the list functions.
Yeah. I had something, I was here. Do you have regrets about not writing your books? Is there some give and take here about that?
No, I've decided that this is what I want to do, and this is what I'm successful doing. So I'm very happy about that. And the books we were working on when Bill and I were working together, we did a lot of things like celebrity quote books. It wasn't War and Peace, put it that way. We did a lot of kids' letters books. Some of the kids' letters books were a lot of fun. But Bill's father wrote the original kids' letters from camp, which was a huge bestseller. So we were doing a lot of that. But my regrets, I do have regrets about things that have been in the listserv, and that's one of the reasons why I end up writing more rules. Like I've had regrets about people who complained about their neighbors' walks being not shoveled. And I realized, no, we can't let people call out their neighbors. That's not good. So yeah, we've made some mistakes, and I think I've learned from the mistakes.
You mentioned the stalker, and I actually had a question in the chat about the stalker. Other than the stalker, have you had other frightening episodes where you thought, whoa, this is out of hand, or
oh, that was enough.
Personally frightening?
That 3-year series of harassing emails from that one guy, well, that was plenty. That made us think we should give this up. The other thing about him, almost everything about him was evil, but he also used to sue people at the drop of a hat. So people would say to us, you know, well, he's harassing you, he's defaming you, why don't you sue him? He would love that. He loved to be in lawsuits with people. He defended himself. He sued lots of people. He loved to be sued. It gave him attention. He just craved attention. So we felt we couldn't sue him. And I do sometimes worry also when people write a post saying this contractor ripped me off and left me with thousands of dollars of repairs that somebody else had to do. I worry too that unless they document it really well, that contractor is going to sue them and sue us. And so we're very careful about negative reviews. We make people prove it, basically, so that we're not posting something that contributes to slandering somebody or libeling somebody, I guess it would be, because it's written.
I would think that's pretty tricky sometimes.
It is very tricky sometimes. And we've also learned that just because a neighbor posts that something happened doesn't mean that it happened the way they said it happened. One of the very first big things that happened many years ago was somebody complained about their gym membership. And they said that the gym owner wasn't returning their calls and was unfair to them and wouldn't give them a refund. And I put it through. And then the gym owner called me up on the phone and said, this person is just lying. I did return her calls. I did offer her a refund, not as much as she wanted, but she's just not telling the truth about it. So I learned there are two sides to every story.
I'm sure that's true. Do you ever, I don't know how long some of these posts gets, do you consider limits on the length of the post as well as sort of the content? Do you edit them down sometimes?
No, I don't edit them down, although if it is too long, I will say, no, this is too long, you've got to shorten it. Yeah, I'd say about 500 words is as long as it should be. If it goes to 750 words, that's kind of stretching it, and any more than that, except of course for my columns, which sometimes run too long. I do run a column every Saturday, which I intend to be lighthearted, although some people take them seriously.
You know, that brings up another question, which is you've got editorials and you've got get out columns and little interesting tidbits of information and helpful hints of information. Do other listservs do this same kind of thing? Are you modeling this on them, or is it something you dreamed up yourself?
This is, I think, unique. I don't think any other listservs do that, as far as I know, and I'm on a lot of them. I'm on too many for me to keep up with them all.
Wow, I don't know how you have enough hours in the day. I really don't.
I don't either. I don't have enough hours in the day.
It's kind of amazing. All right.
But I do enjoy it. I mean, the reason I gave up writing these books and put everything into the listserv is because that's what I really like doing.
Well,
it's very rewarding.
What percent of your members do you think are what somebody in the chat refers to as lurkers, as like people who never post anything, they just watch?
I'd say the vast majority.
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, with 12,000 people, yeah, it would be, we'd be kind of having, again, we'd be having thousands of messages a day if most people weren't lurkers.
Yeah.
And a lot of the messages that come in say things like, I've been on this listserv for years and I've never posted before, but now I want to say this or that. Yeah.
I wish there was a word other than lurkers. It really has this sort of negative connotation.
Right.
Particularly since most of your members are lurkers.
Yeah, no, you might have noticed that there are maybe 200 or 300 people who regularly post about things, and I try not to let the same few voices dominate every discussion. So I do try to encourage more people to chime in, but yes, there are some people who are pretty regular posters, and the vast majority of people never post.
So in terms of your editorial position, when you say you do try to encourage people sometimes to chime in, how do you do that? Do you write personal emails to them? What do you do?
Um, no, but if something is phrased in such a way that only the previous poster can answer it, I will write to that person and say, you've got to direct this more to the whole community. And that way anybody can answer it. And I hope that gets other people to see that it's not just the few people carrying on an argument who count. That
Other people should. Do you know what you've got the biggest listserv? Do you know what the second biggest one is in the country?
I don't know about in the country. The second biggest one is Mary Rouse's Chevy Chase Community Listserv on groups.io. I've looked at the groups.io directory and I see that there's a Long Island group of 5 towns. So it's got a very big membership. I'm not sure whether to count it as bigger than ours, even it technically has more people, but on the other hand, it covers 5 separate towns. So, but it's not moderated. It's big and it's kind of goes all the time.
Okay, I've got one last question from the chat, and that is from Randy, who says, you help so many people. What can we do to help you?
Well,
Besides following the rules.
I hate to pitch for money, but there is the premium membership. I'd be very happy if everybody who wanted to use the listserv more often or felt that they were getting more out of it would want to buy a premium membership. If you go to www.cleveland-park.com, which is the website we started out when we were at Yahoo Groups, when we had a dash between Cleveland and Park. It's www.cleveland-park.com, and there's a premium membership tab, and you can buy a premium membership, and that would help a lot.
All right. Thank you very, very much, Peggy.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun.
Enlightening. I'm going to turn it back over now to Linda. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Peggy and Bar. That was a terrific discussion. We thank you for that, as well as your continued leadership in the community. I know how busy both of you are, and thank you so much for taking time to be here tonight. We hope you did enjoy it. It was a lot of fun and so informative. Pat Whitty, thank you for moderating the Q&A so deftly, and Frank Finnemore, Director of the Village, for keeping us running smoothly behind the scenes. Always thank you to the audience for joining us. There were a lot of people here tonight, and we hope you'll spread the word about Tuesday Talks DC. We're going on a summer hiatus now, but we'll be back in September with more interesting people and fascinating topics. Until then, thanks so much. Be well. Good night.